Hello, I'm Dr. Tess Laurie. Welcome to Tess Talks. If you're disillusioned with conventional medicine and have tried many doctors and many drugs, thank you for joining me on the journey to learn about the many other healing modalities available. Today I'm speaking with Steve Ozanich, an athlete and football player with 3 degrees from Youngstown State University, who is now a professional personal trainer and author of 3 books on healing. Steve has spent more than 10 years researching and writing, working with thousands of pain and fatigue sufferers, and communicating with medical doctors on the topic of mind-body healing. His goal in writing has been to change the way people understand their health and lives, and to encourage them to become more than they think they are, and to pull them towards their natural and limitless capabilities, to free them from their own minds. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity to help some people here.
How did you get from athlete to professional health coach and author?
Well, I started having severe back pain when I was a young boy, and it lasted just under 30 years. I had tried everything, of course, like the normal routes. I'd tried acupunctures and chiropractic, hundreds of chiropractic manipulations, hanging upside down to decompress the spine. And it got so bad in the late 1990s that my left leg was paralyzed. Partially, I lost the foot and the calf and the hamstring in the left leg, and so it had foot drop. And I was dragging it around for 9 months. And of course, we did an MRI, and the MRI showed the normal things: a pinched nerve, a so-called pinched nerve. And you can see what are called osteophytes as the nerve comes out of the spine. It looks like there's no route for it. And so it makes sense that the physician would correlate the findings on the X-rays and the MRIs with the symptoms. But I was blessed to have found the work of a man named Dr. John Sarno from the New York University Medical Center, who's since passed on in 2017. And he had written in his books that nothing's being pinched there. Nothing's being pinched. It may look that way, but there's nothing being pinched. Well, I didn't believe him. Like, very few people believe what I'm about to say here. About 10% of the people will believe what I'm about to say here, but it's still true. And so I kind of threw his book. I got mad, and then I got worse. And the pain was so bad in 99, I think it was 1999, that I couldn't get out of bed. I was crawling around on my hands and knees. I'd stopped eating, and I was actually fading away from this life. And I went back to the work, and I saw the truth in it, and I began to heal. And so after I healed, people started asking me for help. Please help. And of course, every human being loves to help people. It's the greatest joy we can have. And they started to heal. And so they kept saying, you need to write this down, write this down. So I wrote my first book called The Great Pain Deception. And then I've subsequently written 2 more books on the same topic, which Dr. Sarno called TMS. At first, it's evolved through the years. As we grow and evolve our consciousness, he also grew. He called it at first TMS for tension myositis syndrome. Tension being the operative word, myo meaning muscle. And as he evolved himself, he changed that term to tension myoneural syndrome, because he said it involves more than muscle, tendons and nerves and ligaments as well. And then at the end of his life and career, he had changed that term TMS to the mind-body syndrome, because it involves everything, from cancers and MS and things like that. And so I wrote a book to help people with back pain. And since then, I've been able to help people with cancer and MS symptoms. And I helped a lady recently who lost her hearing. She went deaf, get her hearing back. So it does involve every single aspect of our health, which is the mind. The mind.
You know, it is so absolutely fascinating, because as you're speaking, I'm remembering how I used to suffer from terrible back pain and headaches, actually from quite young. And throughout my working life, when I was working in hospitals, working long hours. So I always used to think, oh, well, it's, tension for these long hours, no sleep and that sort of thing on being on call. But it was something I struggled with always when I was working in hospitals and institutions of one sort or another. I kind of thought, oh, well, it's some issue with me, some physical problem, and it tended to be better if I did a lot of physical exercise. So I used to play a lot of sports, squash and racquetball and so on, and I managed it that way. But in actual fact, I haven't had pain for years now, not since I changed my job. And especially now, I'm on this better way. We're promoting a better way through World Council for Health, and I don't have a stitch of pain and haven't had for years. And so certainly when you think about mind, and I don't know, I haven't heard what you're going to tell us, but I can quite understand that it's the state of mind that can change the way one's body feels. And I feel enormously well now. So
Sure. And I've helped a lot of physicians to heal, and chiropractors and so-called pain specialists. Everybody in the world has this syndrome that I'm going to talk about, but there's only about, statistically, maybe 10 or 15% of the people will actually believe it. Well, I should rephrase that. Everybody in the world believes what I'm about to tell them, but they think it's for the other person, not for them. Okay. Yes. And because, their medical doctors shown them proof on imaging and x-rays and things like that, but you need to disregard those at some point. But anyway, TMS stands for the Mindbody Syndrome, which Dr. Sarno, he was the head of the Rusk Center at New York University Medical Center, the outpatient center. And he was very frustrated with his results on back stuff. The surgeries weren't really working. The therapy wasn't working. Other modalities weren't working. And so as a good physician, he went and he looked at their records, and he noted these people have a lot of other health problems as well. The back pain patients have allergies and skin problems and sleep issues and vision problems, things like that. So he did something almost unheard of in today's medicine. He began to talk to his patient. It's almost unheard of. I mean, I have people come to me and they say, my doctor didn't even look at me. Came in the room, looked at the chart, scribbled a prescription, walked out.
Yeah, in the UK, it's sort of 10 minutes. You get 10 minutes with your GP. You're just allowed to talk about one symptom. You can't, so much more an holistic approach.
Yeah, and I actually found a study done here in America. It was 7 minutes that you get with the doctor. But now the TMS physicians will take an hour and a half with people to talk to them. They are the elite of the elite, the cream of the crop. And so he began to talk with his patients, and he began to notice patterns. Goodists, hyper responsible warriors, anxiety people, driven people to win and to succeed and to avoid rejection. We call it a type T person today. He never called it that. The people who've taken over his work have called it a type T for tension builders. Okay, people that want to achieve at high levels. A lot of them have high ACE scores, and so he began to talk to them and say, maybe that herniated disc is not the cause. Okay, there's underlying unconscious anger in you from all the demands that you make upon yourself on a daily basis. You're not going to feel it. They went looking for it. It's very hard to find it because it's repressed. And so these, what he called perfectionistic people, they're angry all the time, but they don't know it. They don't know it. As he began to point this out to them, they began to heal right in front of him, sometimes sitting in front of him in the chair. And I've seen that as well on Zoom sessions when I consult with people. I've seen people with 10 years of back pain heal within minutes. Okay, sometimes, not always. It's not common, but it happens. And so he wrote a book on it called Healing Back Pain, which became the top back pain book in the world. My books can't come close to that book. His book is the Bible of it. Very beautifully written in good language, common language you can understand. And it's just, he's helped millions of people. It's in 30-some languages. And so, of course, like I said earlier, it's expanding. Now we're seeing people healing from everything, sleep problems, vision problems. Some people don't need glasses anymore because tension, the operative word, will elongate the eyeball in and out. A lot of kids, get glasses because they're tense at school. They're worrying. They think their eyes have gone bad. But that's not really true. And so I've seen the most bizarre things heal from this process. And the healing occurs through understanding. And something he called knowledge therapy. That was his phrase. He said, knowledge is the penicillin to this disorder. The person understanding what's going on in their life and in their mind and in their body, getting the big picture, they heal. Now, back and when Christian Science was formed with Quimby, he called it the explanation. He said, the cure is within the explanation. Well, that's the same thing Dr. Sarno meant 100 years later. And so I see people healing every single day from the most bizarre things, and yet nobody wants to believe it. Very few people want to believe it because it feels so mechanical. And what I think, he came up with something that I think is the greatest discovery I've ever seen in medicine. Now, this is my opinion, of course, that he called the symptom imperative phenomenon. That was his phrase. We call it the SI, symptom imperative. That say somebody has back pain and they operate on the disc because the surgeon thinks the disc is causing the pain, which it is not, okay? The back gets better because the person thinks, the placebo effect, they think that the surgery worked, but now they got knee pain or shoulder pain, or it moves up to the next disc and the next disc. I've seen people have 10 back surgeries. It just keeps going because the brain is shifting its focus, because the brain's purpose is to keep you riveted to your body. Like in your case, there's great demands made on you in medical school, tremendous demands in your profession. And so there's tremendous rage in you that you're unaware of. And so to divert your awareness away from that, the unwanted, it wants you to rivet your attention and focus to your physical body. And it does it with beautiful elegance, the way that it does it. And so if you've had surgery on your left knee and you think it worked, because they think it worked, they clear it from the field of consciousness. Now they're limping on the right knee. And of course, the physician will say, well, now you're putting more pressure on the other knee, but that's not what's happening. It's the brain is just shifted. He had theorized or hypothesized that the brain was reducing blood flow slightly to these areas of the body, which reduces the oxygen, which creates a tremendous pain. He said the most painful thing he'd ever seen in clinical medicine, and yet it's harmless at some point. And so, and he backed it up with studies from Germany on fibromyalgia patients who had 50% reduction of oxygen in the cells of their body. And so the amazing thing is that it works every time. But as Einstein came up with E equals MC squared that summarized our outer universe, he figured out our health in this phrase TMS, the Mindbody Syndrome. All of these health problems all disappear all at one time. The allergies, the skin problems, the sleep problems, the pain, the chronic pain problems all disappear because those are just symptoms. The medical industry focuses on symptoms. Every commercial, let's get rid of that symptom. Well, that's not healing, getting rid of the symptom. Getting rid of the cause of the symptom is healing. He found the cause of all the symptoms. And so they fall like dominoes every time. And I've been symptom-free for 23 years now. And I've helped many, many people to be free. But once again, it's very controversial because people will look at the body as a mechanical thing. He said, Dr. Sarno used to say, doctors treat patients like car mechanics. Go in, put them up on the rack, stab it, stretch it, poke it, cut it, change this. But it doesn't work because the body is not the problem. The body is not the problem. It's a mind-body effect. It begins now we need to say too, people aren't imagining this because they get very offended when you tell them it begins in your mind. Oh, you're telling me I'm making it up. Well, no, it's very real. It's very real, but it begins in the mind. And then it manifests in the body if you focus on it. And so the way out of it is always to understand what's going on and then to become present. We call present today, it used to be called mindfulness, but that phrase is kind of fading slightly from the lexicon. But I can help people heal fairly rapidly. I've seen people with fragmented discs in their back. And there's a guy on YouTube, actually, his name's Benzion Scheinfeld. He's a rabbi, and he had a fragmented disc in his back, broken off, the intervertebral, the soft disc. And 4 doctors told him he needed immediate surgery or he would be paralyzed for the rest of his life. Now, that's the subtitle of my book, Faulty Medical Advice is Making Us Worse. They're not just not helping us, they're making us worse at this point. So his tension went through the roof because anger rises with tension, right? And so he heard about Dr. Sarno, and he didn't think he was right either, like I didn't think he was right, but he took his MRIs to see Dr. Sarno, and he said, I knew it. The good doctor was going to say that, this is the rare situation. You've got a fragmented disc. You need surgery, but he didn't say that. He said, Dr. Sarno looked at my MRI and said, son, there's nothing wrong with your back at all. Nothing. And he said, it kind of rocked me because I just had 4 people tell me that I would be paralyzed, right? That's scary. But he said, now I start to defend my back. Well, look at it. It's fragmented. It's stenosis. There's arthritis. There's all these labels they give it. Spondylolisthesis, spondylitis. Dr. Sarno told him, I can show you 1,000 MRIs that look just like that. And the person has zero pain. It's not coming from that. And of course, the rabbi asked Dr. Sarno the question that I get asked every day, which is the golden question. What do I do to get better? Anybody listening right now, that's the question. What do I do to get better? Well, Dr. Sarno said to him, what do you like to do? He said, I like to ski. Then Dr. Sarno said, then go ski. Okay? Because there's nothing wrong with you. And you need to have more fun. You need to get physical like you did. Your pain went away, right? When you went to exercise. Mm-hmm. And of course, he didn't believe him because it was 4 against 1 at that point. The rabbi said 4 doctors against him. And it does sound a little wacky, even to me. I've been doing the work for 23 years. It still sounds crazy to me, but it still works. So he went to the lecture that night. Dr. Sarno held a weekly lecture. And he was driving Dr. Sarno crazy with questions. Well, why did it happen then? Well, why did it happen there? And finally, Dr. Sarno had enough of them and said, you can't ask any more questions. You can't ask any more questions. He just wanted the rabbi to listen. Well, he said, I left that lecture not really buying into it fully, because it does sound a little crazy, but he said 2 days later, the pain disappeared forever. I've been in touch with that rabbi. It never came back. And that's the way it works. The knowledge from that lecture was the healing mechanism, understanding. In other words, expanding awareness, deeper love, whatever word you want to put onto it, right? It works every time, but you have to believe it at some point. The deeper self has to accept it, Physiologically, we could talk for months about what's going on, but I'm not sure what you want to hear right now.
I think I'm just reflecting on how many people are sick, how many people suffer from pain. Pain is probably the most common symptom, people are walking around.
Back pain,
so
too.
many
Yeah,
people are walking around with pain.
Yes.
We also have. Life is quite traumatic. We sort of come into the world, these little beings of love, and then this happens and that happens, and somebody says this, does this, and suddenly we bear all these wounds, and it's almost as if society and the system encourages us to be victims rather than empowers us to realize that we can overcome these things, which is what you're saying with our mind, and that we potentially have the ability to heal ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm just thinking about all the people who are really struggling with pain right now, and they're listening to us and they're saying, well, you don't know how I feel. I actually feel pain is so debilitating. It leaves you feeling weak and exhausted. What would you say to someone? What is the starting point now for someone listening to this and saying, okay, well, what must I do?
Sure. Of course, we have to be responsible. Life is precious. I like what you said, beings of love. That was pretty cool coming into life. It's too precious to mess around with. And so get an exam. Make sure you're not dying, although even then I've seen people reverse it. They've been told that they're terminal, reverse it as well. But we have to do the responsible thing here. Make sure there's nothing dangerous, like, an aneurysm sitting there, something like that. And then if it just comes back, these normal things, osteoarthritis and stenosis, which these things do not cause pain. It's been proven clinically through too many people. And yet the world still wants to believe it. But then start to gather information, I would say. Read the books, get Dr. Sarno's book or get my book. There's several other ones written on the topic. Start to understand and start to connect with what's written in there. Okay. Now there's a small group of people, maybe 10% or so, that might need some counseling or therapy, that have been emotionally abandoned as children. Those are the tough ones, of course, early on. But at that point, the knowledge should be enough. But sometimes people need to go deeper. To me, it was a spiritual journey the entire way, understanding that I'm not my mind or my body. In other words, Dr. Sarno made this statement that was so beautiful. He was reading a New York Times article that said, "Where have all the ulcers gone?" And he was talking about how when he started his medical practice in 1950, every other person that came into his office with an ulcer, but he hadn't seen one in like 25 years. What happened to them? Well, he did some research. It had shifted. The collective consciousness of society had shifted it once they found out that ulcers were not a bad stomach, that it was from stress and tension, right? The brain had shifted it to the postural muscles, the neck and the spine. And there was an epidemic of that. Then with the advent of computers, we've seen that switch into the hands and the feet. And of course, everybody had carpal tunnel syndrome. In my third book, I talked about from 1989 to 1994, carpal tunnel went up 5,000% because the National Health Institute said it was a disease. Okay. Now everybody was getting operated. I don't know if you remember that. Everybody had casts on their arms. And then in the last few years, I've seen Lyme's disease be the new in vogue thing. Every other person, my doctor told me I have Lyme's, but Dr. Sarno proved there's no such thing as chronic Lyme's. It's TMS. The brain is latched onto the symptom and won't let go of it. And I've Zoomed with people and they've healed right in front of me who thought they had chronic Lyme's disease. And once again, the knowledge is the healing tool here. And so what he was saying there is whatever is in vogue at any one time in society, it takes off because it's trapped in the mind field, the collective consciousness of society. Now, once again, people might think that they're making it up. No, it's actually really happening, but it begins right there because it's there. This is where David Hawkins' work is so important too. Dr. Hawkins, he said, he proved it clinically in his practice as a psychiatrist and a medical doctor that nothing can manifest in your body unless it's held in your mind. And they used to take people under deep hypnosis and plant things in them, like your leg is itching, and they would come out and their leg would itch. And so when people are sick or in pain, if they are right now, you have to understand the program's playing, the program that was implanted in you. And so we can reverse that. I'm telling people right now from great experience that they can heal. I'm not saying they will heal because their soul might have other, goals, but I've seen people heal from late stage cancer. A guy sent me his book recently. He was told he was going to die and he's fine now. He was 36 years old, stage 4 cancer. But once he realized it was from, this unconsciousness, that he was asleep at some point and these things were trapped in the field, he's fine now as well. So what do? Get a test, get examined. I wouldn't do it, but this is me. I'm responsible for myself, not anybody else. And then I would start reading the books on TMS, the Mindbody Syndrome. And then if you get stuck, there's people that can help. There's consultants and there's coaches and there's psychologists. Beyond that, we need to stop trying to heal. That's the biggest mistake I've seen. Your brain wants you to think something's wrong and it wants you to try to fix it. Because remember, it's diverting your awareness away from these emotions that are about to overwhelm you. Fear and rage and resentment and these things. They scare us. The way the human being is designed, they prefer physical pain over emotional pain because I think the emotional, we can't control it, I think, at some point. But remember, we don't know these things are there. I didn't know I was angry. And people used to tell me, Steve, you're always so calm and quiet. This is the personality type. They're usually goodists and they're do-gooders and they want to be good. And so I was always calm and cool on the outside. Freud called it a superego, Jung called it a persona. But on the inside, having back pain, I was full of rage. But I didn't know it because it's unconscious. And so the final piece of the puzzle for me was understanding what unconscious means. I'd say, okay, I'm unconscious, but I don't feel the anger. Well, duh, that's what it means. You're not going to feel it, okay, except through the cancer or the MS or whatever. Now, if this rage gets hot enough, the body will attack itself. We call it autoimmune. A lot of people from lupus heal with this work as well. It gets so hot that the negative dark energy begins to turn on the life force and destroy it, as in a heart attack as well, which we know is a tension event as well, heart attacks. And so I don't want to make it too complicated because it can be very simple. I remember when the first person healed right in front of me on Zoom, I thought she was messing around with me. She had pain for 10 years and she's crying, it's gone. I said, no, come on, come on, it doesn't work that way, but sometimes it does. Now, sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it's a battle. We call them trouble healers, but they've had severe emotional abandonment, severe. And so, these people need to also know they're not psychologically messed up, and Dr. Sarno was such a beautiful man. He said something that I'll always remember. He said, I've come to the conclusion after 5 decades, he practiced for 50 years of doing this work, that these people are suffering from chronic symptoms because they're good people. It's beautiful. I mean, that was a beautiful thing to say.
That is a wonderful thing to say. And actually what you said really resonated with me, because I agree. I think I was very angry as a young doctor. I think
it's the demands you're making. Well, it's not really the demands that the world
and the sacrifice as well, because there were certain sacrifices in terms of having a family and that sort of thing. And yes, and I lost my first baby as well, which seemed very unfair. So I think I was very angry, and it certainly makes sense to me. Now, what you're saying about this kind of being zeitgeists of illness that suddenly, affect everybody. It seems that mental health has become the new disease that everybody suffers from. And whilst one can see there is there are obvious causes that sort of spring to mind in the way that we live and work and so on, Western medicine doesn't seem to offer really satisfactory solutions. And I feel a lot of this is emotional pain and trauma from things past. And our approach to it, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but, what I see is people seem to engage in cognitive behavioral therapy. They go to a psychologist and they're in there for years and years. And I wonder if the rumination over the things that have happened are really that helpful. It seems to take an awful long time.
Thank you, because this is the heart of my consulting. Thank you. Psychoarcheology, it's been referred to. Yes, very important. I tell people to stop looking at it. Paramahansa Yogananda was a yogi master who came to America in 1920, who healed a lot of people. He said, don't entertain these thoughts. Once they're trapped in your field, you're in trouble. So analyzing the mind can be tough. Dr. Sarno said that, remember, he did this for 5 decades. He died he was one day before he turned 94 when he passed away. But he said, we tried cognitive behavioral therapy and we found it to be singularly ineffective. Singularly meaning remarkably, it doesn't work. Changing your relationship with things and thinking about them does not help. All you need to know is that there's nothing wrong with you, really. And then you can go back to living, although you may be on the wrong path in life. You may be making more sacrifices than you want to make, like you said. And you may be making too many demands on yourself at this time. And maybe you're in the wrong relationship. All those things, we have to take into. You cannot separate relationship from your health problems. It's impossible. It's the exact same thing. The very first line of my book is life is relationship. That's it. What else is there? And so, of course, the most problematic one is the one that begins with the parents. They're the ones by which we judge all future relationships by at that point. We don't even know it sometimes when we're scanning for a mate, that we're looking for one that would make our parents happy. When he retired, it was a big deal because Dr. Sarno had helped many famous people heal around the world. And a news crew came in to talk to him. And he said to the news lady, why did my patients develop into perfectionist, driven, achievement, goal-oriented people, afraid of rejection, goodest. And she said, trying to please our parents. And he said, exactly. He said, you should have been a psychologist, not a news reporter. He said there. He summarized his 50 years of work up. Ultimately, they're gods to us when we're children, and we want to make them so happy. And yet, with the TMSer, we call them type T people, we couldn't do it. It was impossible. Run through walls to make them happy, and it just did not work. And so they try to be better and better, and they push and they push and push. They don't even realize that midlife they're so unhappy because they spent the whole first half of their life trying to make their parents happy at some point, which never could work.
Absolutely. And I also think, this whole push towards university and getting a degree and then having an office job is so counterintuitive to what's good for us as human beings. So often I see, now I can't help notice everywhere, wonderful grown men doing jobs that, and I think, do they really want to be in that delivery van? Do they really, want to be in that office? Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes. Well, what Carl Jung called it a midlife crisis. You realize at midlife, I've got, Lissa Rankin. I don't know if you're familiar with Lissa Rankin, Dr. Rankin. Was a medical doctor and got cancer. Yeah, she's got a couple great books out there. I've seen her on PBS. She said, I had it all. I had my medical degree, a house on the ocean in California, got cancer, right? And so she's talking about the same thing we're talking about here, the mind-body healing, because she healed herself as well. And ultimately, everything is self-inflicted. Like Louise Hay used to say that everything is self-inflicted. We just don't know we're doing it to ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think, if you go to the doctor and they say you need to take a pill, an antidepressant or something, or an anxiolytic, then that's the sign you need to change something. And it's a difficult thing. So it might be your job, it might be where you live, it might be, your relationship or something, but it's an indication that something's out of balance. Right. And so one has to make that decision. Am I going to take a pill now? I feel absolutely miserable. I want to feel better as quickly as possible. Am I going to commit to this course, which, these days they seem to just keep us on pills for as long as they can. Or, is there something I can change, in my approach to things and approach?
We want the quick fix, and so, cut it out of me. I've had people say that, just cut it out of me, But there was a great book, what was his name? Arnold Hutschnecker, 1950s. He wrote what I used to think was the greatest health book I ever read, called The Will to Live. And he said, I can see it in my patients, they want surgery. He said they're trying to cut out unconscious guilt. It's like the altar, the cross, the altar, the sacrificial operating table. Cut the unconscious guilt out. And guilt, I said at the end of my first book, spoiler alert, guilt was the driving force. I'm not good enough. I've got to push harder. And so it can get very complicated when you talk about the psychology of it, which I don't really believe in that. I do believe in focusing on the present moment, and everybody heals immediately. I just posted a new success video last night on my YouTube wall, Victory. And she said it was the presence work that I talked about, with her, sadness, anger, resentment, that's past. Fear is future. Right? And as long as we are not in the present moment, because every time you think, you leave the present moment, you're going to the past and the future. When you're in the present moment, you're being, the Buddha called it being, you're being in this moment. It solves all of these problems. It's the I am moment, And, but it's very difficult to get there sometimes because the mind is an addiction. It's an addiction, and addictions are hard to break. That's what addiction means. I can't stop. That's what it means, right? And we practice this. Now, this is directly from Carl Jung's work. He saved my life as well as Dr. Sarno. Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychiatrist, he said, the thinking function, the intellectual function, and the feeling, heart function, were polar opposite functions. You can't do them at the same time. If you're doing this one, the other one's impossible. They're mutually exclusive. That saved my life because I did not know I was living in my head. I did not know I was mind-oriented and addicted to my mind because I didn't want to feel anymore. when the child's in the family dynamic and the child's, it's a traumatic or whatever is going on there. It doesn't have to be trauma either. And they don't want to feel anymore because the anxiety and the fear are too high. They shut the feeling function off, he said. And the only way to do it is to move into the intellectual thinking mind. It's called a defense mechanism in psychology, probably because of Jung, because of he was so influential in the field. It's such a beautiful shield to block you from feeling. If you get a scary diagnosis from a physician, one of the first things people do is to go Google it, trying to intellectualize it because they're afraid. And so it's beautiful. But once he showed me I was living in my head and never in the present moment, I began to heal rapidly, very rapidly. Now, it took me a while because I was pretty far gone and I didn't have anyone to go to like me. There was nobody doing this work at this time except Dr. Sarno at that point. Now there's thousands upon thousands of people doing this work because they're all healing. They're all healing. And so the end game is the same. Now, you may take different routes to get there, but the end game is to be in this moment and understand there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. And to start, as you alluded to earlier, which is a beautiful point, I might not be in the right job or right relationship. In the 1900s, everybody had to have a college degree, right? Boom, boom, boom. And then it became a skill set. Now it's a skill set. And so Alyssa Rankin's point is the same too. You got to be living a life that's true to your heart, that you really love and enjoy. Stop trying to make everybody else happy. That's what this personality is trying to do, because the number one fear of everybody is being rejected. Every day we're always trying to avoid rejection at some point. But when you're living, like I love this work that I do, I really enjoy it. You can probably tell I really enjoy it. And so I'm healthy, and I stay active. Mm-hmm. I had a paralyzed leg, and yet I've hit 1 million golf balls since then. I lift and run. My back has to look a lot worse than it did in 1999 if I was to do an MRI, right? And so understand that it's not a physical body problem, that the body is just reporting on what's going inside that you're unaware of. Mm-hmm. Now, that's too big of a leap for many people, but if one person heals from our talk today, we did a good job today. We did a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would like to also just mention that there's so much we don't know about the way we heal and science. We know less of what there is to know. We know so little. We know such a small fraction of all the uncertainties about life and the way we function. And you mentioned Jung, and Jung, yes, he was a great scientist, and he in terms of what he brought forward, a philosopher. But he wrote the foreword to the I Ching, which basically is a 5,000-year-old oracle book that involves throwing some coins and receiving an answer. And for that book, he said, I don't know how it works, but it works. And just recognizing there's something we don't know. There's a lot we don't know about how we function, and the thinking part of us is out of balance with the feeling part of us, the heart-based choices and decision making. So we need to somehow combine the thinking and the feeling, and go with more of an intuitive approach to health.
This is brilliant. I quote the I Ching, when I work with people, verse 71. It's just 81 verses. That's all it is. And I quote verse 71. Your organization is the future. I can tell by the way you're talking here. It's the future of healing. What does verse 71 say? If one is sick of sickness, one is no longer sick.
Yes, you're thinking of the Dao Ching. The Dao Ching. So the Dao Ching.
Yeah, right. And both of those. But it also says under there, the sage is not sick because the sage is sick of sickness. But people fall into the victimization mode. I heard you mention that earlier. They fall into victimization. Like right now, some people might be saying, well, you're blaming the victim. Well, you're not a victim unless you feel you're a victim at some point. You're not a victim because you don't know. We don't know this is happening. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is all happening outside of awareness. And so once again, knowledge is the healing tool. And like Jung had stated as well, we don't really know. Well, it's expanding consciousness. The more we open this third eye right here, the wiser we get, the more people are healing. Yeah, Anita Morjani, I'm not sure if you're aware of her work as well, but she had died from cancer in 2006. It was gone 34 hours, came back. She said, I have thousands of emails from people from around the world whose cancer disappeared when they realized through her work that it wasn't a disease per se. You know, Bruce Lipton's talking about this. There's no disease per se. You know, other we don't understand Huntington's and Tay-Sachs that they mutate from generation to generation. But you know, the cell goes cancerous when you tell it to. You know, Lipton says epigenetics is the phrase that he uses. And so, yes, as we understand more people are healing. As we understand more, but belief is going to be the key. If somebody wants to know what the belief is, what the key is, it's belief. There's a man that I'm writing in my new book named Jim Pierce from the United Kingdom. He was in a wheelchair, pain all over his body, got into the largest placebo trial in the UK's history, and they gave him the strongest pain pill in history, and he was up moving around and walking. Well, when they brought him back in with the trial, they said there was nothing in that pill. There was nothing in there. And I saw him on the international news, and they were saying, do you want the wheelchair back, or do you want the fake pain pill? He goes, I'll take more of the fake pain pill. But the power of the mind and belief is beyond belief. And I'm sure you know more about this than I do with your background. You know, they've told men, you know, they'll lose their hair with chemotherapy, and they've given them saline water and their hair falls out. You know, belief is so powerful. People believe they're going to die, they die. And the doctors will kill them by saying you're terminal, you know, and if they believe that, if you look at the what is Spontaneous Remissions Project, and you look at the commonalities of those people that were supposed to die that are alive today, well, one of the main threads was they didn't buy into the doctor's words. They didn't believe it. I reject that. I'm going to die. Live, right? And so be careful where you put your focus and attention, because you may give yourself something. The Buddhist Heart Sutra says this from thousands of years ago. Reality exists only where you put your focus. That's right. Yeah. Because of the field, every potential is in the field. But where we observe it, we collapse it into what's called a singularity. And if you focus on sickness, it was a J. Krishnamurti who said, you know, it's not no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society at some point, you know. And of course, commercials on TV, that's their job, keep you sick. Mm-hmm. The pharmaceutical industry, every second, the remote button's worn out on my remote, mute. Because they're programming that. And I've seen so many people say, I saw a commercial with foot pain, I couldn't walk the next day. There was a guy who did a great article on Dr. Sarno in Forbes magazine called America's Best Doctor. That was the name of the article, because he had helped this guy had shoulder pain. The guy said, the guy next to me had shoulder pain, and a week later, I couldn't raise my arm. It's called contagion. Social contagion. We're a meme. I talked about it in terms of meme theory. We're passing things along like viruses, because thoughts are viruses. They have the consciousness with them. There's a frequency associated with them. So be very careful where you put your attention and focus. You know, and of course, if we would only put our attention and focus on living instead of how not to die, you know, we would be much healthier. And your organization is the organization.
Thanks, Steve. Well, we're focusing on a better way. So that's where we're placing our focus. I want to thank you so much for your time today. Everybody, Steve's website is steveozanich.com. And we'll put it up in the Substack as well. I just want to remind everybody that one of the second principle of the Better Way Charter is that we take responsibility for our life, our health, and our choices. The power of choice is an amazing gift. And you know, we can use it at all times. And let's choose health and wellness. There is a better way. Thanks for joining us today. If you find something of value in these Test Talks videos, please consider supporting their production by making a donation or becoming a paid subscriber to our Substack. Thank you.